Minister, I'd like to return to the RT Investigates issues on homeless services operated in Dublin, which will be of concern obviously to the NGOs involved and my own colleagues on Dublin City Council, including Councillor Janet Horner and Lord Mayor Hazel Chew. So firstly, I'd actually like to return to the issue of local connection that Deputy Tobin rightly raised. Your letter that you referred to in your answer only outlines that it will relate to the cold weather period, which obviously won't last. Now, we have also had assurances from local authorities that they will apply maximum discretion in applying the supposed local connection rule, but I really feel that we need more, and I would propose that what we would need is instruction in legislation, or perhaps a circular, that this is not a matter of maximum discretion but an obligation on local authorities to provide emergency accommodation where the alternative for someone is sleeping rough on the streets. No one should be forced to forego the safety and dignity of a bed and a roof over their head in a city where thousands of empty properties are available. Secondly, a key concern for service users is safety in emergency accommodation centres. We are awaiting a report from the Dublin Homeless Executive and the HSE about the standards in emergency accommodation centres in Dublin, and I would ask the Minister to give an undertaking today that that report will be published promptly and in full. Thirdly, I would ask the Minister ensures that all staff in emergency accommodation facilities are Garda vetted and trained to deal in a sensitive way with people who are in a deeply vulnerable position, as that is currently not the case and many are not Garda vetted. Lastly, from 2016 to 2020, the budget for homelessness services in Dublin has gone from 96 million to 200 million. This partially reflects the growing scale of the homelessness crisis in Dublin, but it also reflects the growing use of private emergency accommodation facilities. We see private emergency accommodation in the North Inner City being advertised as returning a 100% annual profit on running costs under a 10-year contract with DCC. This is a significant profit for a service over which we have very little and, I would say, insufficient oversight. Contracts for providing emergency accommodation not subject to the public procurement process that would be the norm for other services contracted in the state. We need to be procuring services that are care-based, underpinned by respect for the dignity of the individuals using the service, not locking people into homelessness for profit. In the long term, we need to eradicate, not manage homelessness, but in the short and medium term, could the Minister outline the procurement and oversight of private providers in this sector, Garda vetting of staff in emergency accommodation, the status of the report on standards of accommodation in homelessness in Dublin, and the status of guidance given to local authorities on maximum discretion, which you have touched on already.
Thank you very much. Minister.
I thank the Deputy for her question. A number of points that are raised. I just want to be really clear once more in relation to local connection. It's no barrier for anyone in this country accessing an emergency accommodation. I followed up that letter, by the way, that you referred to of the 9th, followed up an announcement that I made on the 7th. I've had meetings since with the local authorities, with housing officers and indeed with the Dublin Regional Homeless Executive. I've had a couple of meetings quite recently. We follow that up with an additional letter, which I'm happy to share with the Deputy indeed. We have capacity in our cities. We have emergency capacity. It should be used, and we've got to recognise as well, I'd agree with Deputy Hurricane as well, is that we want to reduce the need to use emergency accommodation. That's actually happening. Already we're looking at the capacity within our hostels that are not being used because people are being moved into permanent accommodation. If we looked at 3,600 voids that came back into the system in 2020, many of those focused on homeless individuals and families where we've been able to house them permanently, and that's absolutely what we want to do. The other items that you raised, I don't have time to respond to, but I will respond to each of the items that you've raised directly in writing. I too as well want to see on the procurement side on private accommodation. Many of those elements of private accommodation were procured quickly and in emergency times when accommodation was needed. Thankfully, we're starting to move away from that emergency response, but I will respond in detail to Deputy Hurricane in writing. Okay?
Now we go to the Rural Independent Group.